In this video, we'll discuss how you can use CSSGrid containers in the UX component to build responsive layouts that are highly customized. So you can see here we have a layout that has first name and last name on the same line, and first name and last name are the same width. Then on the next line we have address, and address spans the entire width of the container. Then on the third line we have city, state, and zip, and you can see here that city is 3 times the width of state and zip is twice the width of state. And then finally we have a button that's on the extreme left of the container and another button that's on the extreme right of the container, but the layout is completely responsive. So as I reduce the size of the layout, you can see that the buttons on the left and the right stay in their positions, and that the city field remains 3 times the size of the state field as I go down. And the same thing is true of the first name and last name. They stay the same size, but they both become smaller. So you can see as I make it smaller, we can see there's city and state and zip all with their same relative size, and the buttons both on their same positions, bound to either the left side or the right side of the component. So let's take a look now at how this was done. So if we go into design mode, we can see that all of these controls here have been placed inside a container that has a subtype of CSSGrid. And if we go look at the grid itself, we can see that the grid itself has been defined to have 6 columns with a gap of 5 pixels between columns, and it also has 4 rows. And then these are all of the controls that are inside this container. So we can see here inside the container we have first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, and then button left and button right. And then this builder here shows the position on the grid of each one of these controls. So let's pause now and take a look at how these controls were placed onto the grid. So in this video we're going to show now how you can use the CSSGrid container to create complex responsive layouts in the UX component. So you can see here we have a simple UX that's got a number of controls all just laid out one after the other because of the breaks there between the controls. So we're going to go now and select all of these controls and then go to container and then choose the CSSGrid container. So that's going to place all of these controls inside a CSSGrid container. And now let's go and configure the container. So we'll go there to the grid container layout, and we'll change the number of columns to say 6 columns, and then we'll change the number of rows to say 4 rows, and then we'll start placing the controls onto the grid. So let's also go and increase our gap size to say 4 pixels. So if we want to place the first control in this first cell over here, we just click on the cell and then click on first name. And then we'd like to make this first name span 3 columns. So we'll go to column span there and just change that to 3. Then we'll click on this next column and click on last name over here. And again, we'd like to make this span 3 columns. So we'll go there and say 3 columns over there. Now on the next row, we'd like to have the address field. So let's click on this row, choose address. And we'd like to have address span the entire width of the grid. So we'll just click the width button there, which basically is going to go here and set the width of the address field to be end over there. So this is going to span the entire width. So then we'll go to the next row and we'll put the city field here with a span of 3. So we'll go there and say city. And then we'll go and we'll set the span to 3. Then we'll go here and we'll put the state field with a span of 1. And then finally we'll put the zip field with a span of 2. So we'll go there and say span and then a span of 2. So this means that the city field will always be 3 times the width of state, and the zip field will always be twice the width of state. And now we'd like to have this button 1 in the left cell, so we'll go there and we'll choose button 1 over there. And then we'd like to have button 2 in the rightmost cell, so we'll go there and choose button 2 right. And we'd also like to have button 2 be aligned to the end of the cell, so we'll go and change our horizontal justification to end. So we're all done now, and we've configured, not only have we configured the size of the grid, but we've also placed these controls on the grid. And you can see that as we give focus to a different control on this pick list here, the control is highlighted on the grid, and we can see its properties in the window below there. So let's go ahead now and click OK, and then we'll go ahead now and we'll run our component, and we'll see that we have this complex layout now. So we have first name and last name on the same line. Then there's address with a span of the full width of the container, and there's city, which is now 3 times the width of state, and zip, which is twice the width of state. But it's, as I mentioned before, it's responsive. So if I go and change the entire width of the container to say 50%, and we run it again, we'll see that we still have the same layout, but all the controls have the same relative size. So first name and last name now are the same width but smaller. They are the same relative width, but their width is now smaller because the container itself is smaller. And then city, state, and zip continue to have the same relative size, and then the button on the left and button on the right are both still positioned correctly. So what we've shown here is how you can use the CSSGrid container to position controls on a grid, creating complex layouts. Thanks very much for watching.